Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Wifey Vibe podcast. I'm your host, Karen McCarran. Thank you for joining me. I had put a call out to a bunch of some groups that I belong to, one in particular, the Tony Robbins crew group. So if you've crewed a Tony Robbins event, we have our own special little community. And I put a call out to get some amazing men on the show, and lots of them put their hands up, and that makes me very, very happy. And all I said was, where are my traditional and masculine energy men? I want you on my podcast. And our first guest in this series, we'll call it, is David Richards. So welcome to the show.
Thank you
Um,
so much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming on. And so I'll let you know, I know I did have a peek at your bio. I know you're an author, you've written a few books, and coaching is one of the things you're passionate about. And you were in the military, which is even more cool, I think, when you've got somebody who is, the can be a scary place. It can be very violent and all the things. War is war. So I love when I hear from men like you who've been on that side of the coin and then come into this other deeper understanding of themselves. So welcome to the show. Thank you for coming. I'm just going to rapid fire some questions at you, but first tell the audience, tell the ladies and gentlemen that are listening a little bit about your journey and kind of what you did and how you came to even, because most guys don't even know the term masculine energy. I mean, they're starting to, but maybe tell us a little bit of the backstory and kind of how you got there, and we'll just go from there.
That sounds great. First, Kara, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to speak with you and your audience. I grew up in the military. My dad was in the Marines. He was an officer. He served in Vietnam, and I was raised into that environment. And so in the military, it's wild because in one sense, we lived most of the time on military bases, and that is like this Stepford Wives alternate reality
Mm.
because like no one locks their doors, everybody dresses the same to go to work. I mean, it's this kind of surreal environment, but it also provides this amazing amount of safety because everyone's literally kind of on the same team.
Right.
So we moved around a bit. I had the great fortune to be exposed to other cultures. We lived in Japan for 3 years when I was a boy, and just getting that exposure was amazing. Just such a blast and such a diverse experience. We lived in Okinawa, the island of Okinawa, but we spent some time in the Philippines. We went to South Korea, and then
Oh,
came back
just
and
give
real.
me 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. I'm losing audio here.
Uh-oh.
Okay, go. Let's hear.
Um, so coming back to the United States then and realizing that I was the only one of my classmates who really had that experience was also eye-opening. Um, Went to Penn State, got an undergrad in English, and wanted to write. I had some success getting things published when I was in high school, which was so foreign growing up on a military base, but at the same time had no idea what the real world was like. And so I joined the Marines. When I was 23, I was leading Marines in combat in Somalia back in the early 90s. And kind of just thought like I was going to follow my dad's footsteps. He did 31 years in the Marines. He
Wow.
retired, and that was my blueprint for life. Joined them, even though I didn't like moving around all the time. Let me do this for a living, and I'll just kind of follow that box step. And then around 2000, I started writing poetry again because I had some inspiration. I met a muse, and this person just inspired me to write. Um, and that was weird in the Marines because my fellow officers would look at me sometimes and just ask, "Are you gay?" Like it's
Right.
okay. It's okay if you
You're
are. It's don't
cool.
ask, don't yeah, it's don't
Yeah.
ask, don't tell. But I just want to know because you write poetry. And
Is
I
that
kind of was always
crazy?
like, have you seen my poetry? It's like Achilles, and it's just like it wasn't dark, but it was deep.
Right.
Um, and then I kind of realized midway through the 2000s that I'd been married, divorced, I had a daughter, and I couldn't find the most important part of my life was that stability in a relationship.
Right.
And I kind of finally realized the one thing I hadn't done was change what I did for a living. So I decided to get out in 2006. I went to work for Cisco, the IT company, and I settled in North Carolina. And it was cool because I realized I have a chance to live in one place
Hmm.
perpetually. I can settle down. Can get to know what an area feels like. Oh my gosh, I can write. I can start writing again. And so I navigated the transition from military to civilian life, and that took some time just
I
because
bet.
you said, I mean, the military is its own entity, and especially for the first probably 2.5 years, I was surrounded by men. Like
Right.
I was in the artillery. You did not really see or interact with women in uniform, and then it slowly started to change through the mid '90s. But that was a cultural shift, and men among men, there's this apishness that kind of comes out.
Right.
It's just the reality of that environment. So when I got out, this transition took several years, but I also realized, okay, let me start writing. And it took me 11 years before I published my first book. And the shift I made was growing up, I loved like Stephen King. I loved
Hmm.
the Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, one of my favorite books. And I wanted to write horror. And then in 2017, I read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And in that book, he says, "What is the purpose of your life?" And I was
Yep.
blown away that my life had this compass, this magnetic north that I could tune into and navigate by. And so I said, I'm going to help people find their purpose in life. And that was my first book, Whiskey and Yoga. It came out in
Yep.
2017, international bestseller. And I thought, I've made it. This is it. I'm here.
Yeah.
And about a week after the launch, someone said, "Well, how are you going to help people?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a good question." I don't like, I felt like the purpose thing was so done. So I'm like, well, that's not it. So I was still doing the corporate thing. I'd been teaching yoga for a while at that point, and and then I just kind of started to evolve. That year was the first year I also went into UPW, Tony Robbins Unleash
Hmm.
the Power Within, and Date with Destiny. And it took me about 2 years to process everything I learned from those events to really incorporate it into my life. And then that led into the pandemic and just this giant transformation that has brought me into coaching, about to publish my fourth book, and just serving at a much deeper and higher level.
That's a lot of life so far, hey?
Yeah, a little bit, a little
Yeah.
bit.
Um, so okay, so I guess the first thing I'm curious about is the marriage part. So you mentioned
Yeah.
married and so do you have how many kids do you have now?
I have two. I've got a 33-year-old son and a 26-year-old daughter.
Okay. So 26-year-old daughter, yeah. So I have four myself, four girls. Oldest is a stepchild, but then it's 20, almost 28, which blows me away because I feel like I just gave birth to her.
Right.
And then 23 and 15, all girls, four of them. So in the spirit of talking about because I think part of when we talk about masculine and feminine energy, and that's obviously the wifey vibe. The wifey vibe is really, if you're first time listening to the show, really what it means is saying, as women, it's okay if we want to be someone's wifey. Like you don't even necessarily have to be married, but you can still have that energy of compassion, nurturing, and playfulness. I think that's sort of at the crux of feminine energy is to be playful. And it's really hard to be playful if you're around men who aren't like you, frankly, David, like that. Even just in this short conversation, there's a presence about you that feels safe. And I think
Hmm.
one of the
Thank you.
things that's important to talk about, and maybe you can explain a little bit deeper into it, is that safety piece where the reason women have such a hard time being that playful feminine vibe is because we don't feel safe. And I know like you've done how many date with destinies have you done? More than one or have
Oh,
you?
um, four. I crewed the last one last year, and then I'm going to this one coming up. So this will be my
I
fifth
think I
one.
might crew this one. I just actually got a
Oh,
ticket.
cool.
Um I think I just got a ticket, a Platt guest ticket for UPW that I might try to just go. I'm in Toronto, so it's like a 7 hour drive. And I
Yeah.
love like that's a good amount of time to be in the car. Otherwise, I'm like, I'm flying. Um, but one of the things, and this is something that I'm always curious about from a man's perspective, is that safety piece. Like I know what I feel, emotional safety, financial safety, physical safety. Those are all things that help a woman to like just relax. So maybe speak a little bit on that, on your what your feelings are about that, because I know it can be overwhelming nowadays because of the cost of things. For example, like I posted on that on my wall. I don't know. You should go check it out. There's quite a heated debate between a woman that I'm friends with and a guy I'm friends with. And they're
Okay.
both from Tony Robbins. And I
Okay.
just said, if you want a woman to feel like if you want a playful woman, then you have to do this. It's not, a woman's not going to come to it on her own now. We need to see that we're safe enough to go into the feminine, not let's just go all be feminine and feel safe when we don't, because that just doesn't, it won't work in the reverse. So maybe talk a little bit about your feelings on providing safety for women, what that looks like for in real time for a man, and just educate maybe us on how it feels, because I know the expectations are high for guys right now, but maybe just, yeah, if you can speak to a little bit about what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, I would say the first thing, it's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is a man needs to own himself,
Mm,
because when they don't, then they're looking for something outside of us to complete ourselves. I mean, it's
right.
the Jerry Maguire, you complete me syndrome, right?
Yeah.
And we all have a propensity to do it, but if you're not aware of it, you're going to struggle, whether it's alcohol, whether it's retail therapy, whether it's porn, whatever it is. When you're looking outside yourself, you're trying to fill something that's already inside of you you haven't identified yet. So once
Right.
you start to really own and identify, then you get to a place where this is solid. Like this is, and part of what you feel when you said safety is I own who I am, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it's all me. And I've kind of tempered it down. You can talk about archetypes in a little bit. When you live in that space, then the desire is to make every woman feel safe. It's
Mm,
not just your partner, because what you're doing is by honoring the feminine in you and respecting the divinity that I see in you, it's making you feel that place of safe and openness and wanting to receive and also wanting to give. It's also done from a place of, I wouldn't necessarily call it chivalry, but it's that if I have an alignment to a higher or if there's a single woman in my life that is the pinnacle of my being, kind of the my soulmate, for lack of a better term,
yep.
then I'm honoring her by honoring you and making you feel safe. And it's that, I think a lot of times because men have this tendency to perpetuate femininity outside of themselves. I'm sure you've been in a situation where maybe your partner, you've caught them looking at another woman and the energy shift is instant. And
Right.
Tony Robbins tells a story where he's walking with Sage and sees this beautiful woman and Sage instantly picks up on it. That's because it's that realization that even that little micro transaction means you're not honoring your partner as fully as you can. And so once you own yourself, that's where the safety for someone else comes from.
Hmm. I love that. And I think, so I mean, a follow-up question to that is, where do you think men in general, where do you think, so my views on this, where a woman lost her femininity versus where everything kind of went crazy, at least in my small teeny, data that I have, it seems like the 70s and the 80s were kind of really when things went crazy. And what I mean by
Okay.
that is, um, women were told we can go to the job, we can go do this, we can go earn money, we can go and be all independent. And like even media, and I'm super anti mainstream media. I think if we're in the Tony community, we probably, most of us are. We're
Yeah.
critical thinkers. We're not. I don't even have television in my house. Like I watch Stranger Things on Netflix. Like
I love
I
it.
mean, that show's amazing. No one can tell me otherwise. It's like my whole 80s childhood in a series. It's perfect.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
So
It
good.
definitely has such an 80s vibe. It's
Oh,
incredible
it's
how they
so
do
good.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
But when you think about media back then, right? It was like Knots Landing, Dynasty, Falcon Crest, Dallas. Like all the women were high-powered bitches. Period.
Right. Right.
And Roseanne designing women. Like if you really go back and you start to watch what women my age were watching at that time, we were being conditioned to think we don't need a man. And if we have a man, we're still the boss, we're still the alpha. And so the whole messaging became as you go. And I raised, my daughters halfway through. Sydney in particular, she's 20, she's the one who's almost 28. And I remember I was a single mom before I met Ken, and I would be like, the first thing I would just be bombarding her with, never need a man. That was the
Mm.
byline in my house. Never need a man for anything. And I felt strongly about it because I didn't know. I grew up in an environment where my mom was the masculine, my dad was the feminine. And so when I think about where things have gone, we swung the pendulum far too far to the right with independent women. And now you have this entire generation, and if you've spent any time, and I do talk to women younger, 20, 30s and 20s, it's bad. Like it's really bad. There's a whole collection of them that are like, fuck this. I actually don't want that life. I want to actually be cared for by a man and cherished and be in a more, thank God. But you got to
Yeah.
figure out finances because it's not like it was in the 50s anymore, right? Like it's hard to
Right.
live on one income. But
Yep.
people are figuring it out. They're doing side hustles. The women are doing little things on the side to earn money for their family. It's working. Like there's ways around it. But where do you think it went wrong? Because now you guys have this messaging like, I can change my own tire, I can change my own friggin' light bulb, like I can do all the things, I don't need you. And you've heard that from women probably forever now. So when you think about where did it go wrong for guys and losing touch with who they are, and like I always describe a man in his masculine as an oak tree, there's nothing moving you. And I like an oak tree
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
can slam up against it and you're still stoic. And I know, oh, I can be kind of crazy and I can be in my emotional self and I can hit that oak tree and he's not moving. That's hot. That makes you feel safe. That's sexy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where do you think it kind of went where you guys turned into the willow tree over time? If you have any ideas of on that.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. It's another just fascinating question. In some sense, I'm a student of history. That's the gift of being in the military is you study history. And then recently
Right.
I've been studying history from a different perspective for my next book. But you go back 1,000 years and women were told to be silent. Like, and in the military, even in the early 90s, we used to have a saying, know your role and shut your hole. I mean, that was kind of this like, yeah, I mean, it's horrible, but that was kind of the mindset, especially
Sometimes
when you're
we
around.
need it though. Sometimes we do need it. Like
Well, it's
really.
also when you're around 30 men all day
Yeah.
for 6 months at a time,
Yeah.
there's almost a de-evolution that takes place, right?
For
And this
sure.
was, I
I'm sure.
mean, in the early 90s, it was, I was listening to Motley Crue, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple
Pearl Jam.
Pilots, Pamela Anderson was hot,
Yeah.
Playboy was huge. I mean,
Yep.
that was kind of the mindset, and there was this objectification.
Right.
And I would go back from a TV. I love what you said from Knots Landing and Dynasty and things like that. I would go back further. You go back into the 70s with like
Hmm.
I Dream of Jeannie or
Right.
Bewitched.
Yep.
And what do those shows say? You have a man who is kind of a bumbling idiot.
Yep.
The in I Dream of Jeannie, the husband was an Air Force astronaut or
Yep.
pilot, and then the guy was just a worker in Bewitched, but they were kind of doofy. And it was
Right.
the women who had the brains and the women who really kind of controlling things. And then that message began to soften as maturity started to creep into media, and you got Dynasty and Knots Landing and things like that. From a male perspective, it's almost like because men are very physically and visually oriented, it's almost like they just became brutish in a way.
Right.
Like it's the alpha male syndrome where you think the alpha male is the loudest or the
Like,
biggest or the strongest. Yeah. And they've actually done, I just was listening to Jordan Peterson, speaking of Canada.
yep.
And he was talking about that someone did a 30-year study on chimps.
Hmm.
And what they found, the alpha male in the chimp is someone who is a peacemaker and has a very strong social network. So it kind of put on its head the idea that the alpha male is the one who
All by himself.
subjugates everyone else. Yeah, like who pumps everyone else down. Well, that shift hasn't happened in male society, certainly not in Western society, I would say. And so
Right.
what ends up happening is you have men who have this inflated sense, and that's what they feel like they need to pump their chest out kind of, and they don't have the communication skills to meet a woman on her level. And so often, I mean, we hear this, I mean, my daughter talks about she looks to date older men
Right.
because of the maturity factor. And I know when I was 20 something, I was not suitable for someone my age from a female counterpart perspective. And so the absence, that toxic masculinity is almost an inability for men to communicate on a deeper level. And I would contend part of that is because one, there's kind of afraid because they don't necessarily know how to have an authentic conversation with any woman, let alone their significant other, or it's only with the significant other. And because of that, then there's this isolation where I can't talk to other women. And it's almost this imbalanced sense of immaturity from a masculine perspective because of our conventional values on marriage and things like that.
Writing, you should see my notes. I'm just like, I'm like Tony that way. I'm always like, I'm listening and I'm
Yeah,
learning and I'm thinking of new questions. So if you saw
all
my
good.
chicken scratch, you'd be like, whoa, girl, calm down. Just relax.
No, it's all good. It's a great question though. I mean, really,
Yeah.
because it is the most beautiful thing is when you make a woman feel safe, every conversation becomes this just fragrance. It is a
Mm,
deep, passionate fragrance of beauty and authenticity because you're operating from a place of I don't want anything from you. I'm not trying to get you into
right.
bed.
Yeah.
I want to know your soul and see how I can serve and connect with you so that we have a bond that is built on something firmer than a mattress. I mean, that's
Right.
really what it
Oh,
comes down to.
that's a tagline. I don't know if you're into marketing, but that's a tagline right there. Holy shit. I'm a marketer. That was good.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's really
It
good.
just spur of the moment. It was just spur of the moment.
Um, yeah, and I think like well, and I made a joke about the spiritual F boy before we got on here and
Right.
talking about
Right.
it. But that's a thing. Like there's this weird culture shift, I think, where younger men and older men, but younger men like in their 30s and 40s are catching wind of a woman wants to feel seen and heard and all the things, but they do it in this kind of creepy, still toxic way where
Right.
they're trying to sort of say, well, I've done the ayahuasca retreats or I've done they call themselves spiritual and they have a man bun and they wear like, beads all day and they think that cuts it. Like that's going to make, because it is still it's an F boy, but it's just a dialed up one because they're
Yep.
using spirituality to really like manipulate a woman still into thinking, I need this guy for this, this, and this, and not really realizing like, I think when there's a good man in your presence, like in our community of Tony Robbins, there's a few people that I'm friends with, as soon as they're around, it's like my whole nervous system just completely shuts right to sleep. Like
Yeah.
it is such a crazy, like immediate feeling. And I'm a huge hugger. If we crew together, you'll see I'll probably drape myself on you 20 times a day. I usually do usher leads, so I'm right in the thick of it. And
Nice.
I'm
Oh, awesome.
hugging
Awesome.
everybody all the time. But there's certain dudes where I'll just melt. Like, and it's platonic. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
People still
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
oh, it means something. It doesn't. It's platonic. And I'll just melt into him. And I'm just for those like 2-3 seconds, I'm like, man, that feels good. And I think that's the piece that's missing is like, I feel in order to get to that level for a man, you really got to go deep inward to
Yep.
understand like the frame that you're providing. It's not just lip service. It's not just talk
Yeah.
talk. It's like really going deep into your ego for one, right? Because a lot of guys are like, and I'm kind of leading us somewhere. Um, a lot of men are in this day and age are still thinking the 50-50 mindset, which to me means 50-50 at a dinner, 50-50
Mm.
bills, 50-50 rent. Now, I know it's 2024 inflation, blah, blah, blah. I don't think either one of us subscribes to the narrative. I think we all know we can make our own money and make a lot of money and do
Yep.
all this stuff. But there still is this vibe of equality. And I think what's missing is if you remove finances from it, let's say, there's still something that you can provide that I cannot provide. I can breastfeed a baby, you can't.
Sure.
There's no way to say it. You can provide that feeling of safety, but only when you've done the work. Because I
Right.
think before that, you're looking for safety. So maybe speak a little bit on like the work that is required, or maybe that you've done. Like, I mean, there's a lot of young men, old men, in the middle men who've got trauma. They think, it doesn't bother me. Oh, it
Yeah.
does.
Oh, for
So
sure.
how does that manifest for a man? Like, the maybe talk about the before and after journey of not even realizing that something needs dealing with and then dealing with it and then coming out the other side of that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a great question. How much time do we have?
As much time as you want, my friend.
Well, the first thing I would say is I published Whiskey and Yoga was my first book, and I published it in
I love that title.
2017.
That's the best
Thank you.
title ever. So cool.
It was after 11 years of trying to write fiction stories. And I mean, I was working, I was traveling, 40 or 50% of the time for work, but I would come home on weekends and I would try to write. And it's on the surface, it's so common sense. I can type sentences, I can string words together, I can put paragraphs together. to be able to express yourself articulately to yourself is a journey.
Mm.
And I remember writing, I wrote when I decided, oh my gosh, this is the book I'm going to write, I wrote from like January until April, and it took me that long to write about 200 pages, but it was all autobiographical. And right around the middle of April in that year, I stopped and kind of looked at what I had, and I said, no one is going to give a crap about this. Like, this is not going to help anybody. I need to figure out how to help someone find their purpose in life. So I threw away everything I had, which was frustrating unto itself
And
because
painful. Yep.
yeah, like 200 pages. And then I came up with the 10 chapter outline and I wrote the book in 2 months.
Wow.
And it was like, oh, that's really cool. And then for my next book, and I'm getting somewhere too. For my next book, I didn't journal, but I started to appreciate that there is a skill to be gained by writing by hand. Like, and
Yep.
I just started doing writing exercises by hand because it was like I realized through the world of texting and through the world of typing on a computer, I was good at telling people what I needed them to do from a leadership perspective.
Right.
I was not good at expressing myself to myself.
Hmm.
And so when I wrote my second book, it was fiction, but it was the idea that our mind is an ocean and our lighthouse, our awareness is a lighthouse. And it was a story of this young man who goes on a journey to become a lighthouse keeper. And I studied lighthouses for months, just trying to get the feel of what it's like. And that translated into my writing. And then came the pandemic, and I had a brilliant idea for a book, and I could not figure out how to bring it to life, quite frankly. And so for 2 years, the first 2 years of the pandemic, I journaled every day.
Wow.
And it was that process of kind of that was where the inner work began because it's, what do you believe? What do you think this story is? How do you convince that? Who do you need to become to be able to tell
Yep.
this story? That then opens up the can of worms, right? Because then it goes into Tony's world, and Tony talks about Carl Jung's work on archetypes.
Yep.
So you've got the sovereign, you've got the lover, you've got the warrior, you've got the magician, and we all have these archetypes within us. And in order to become whole, we need to integrate those archetypes. And books have been written about how do you integrate the archetypes. Well, for me, in the military and having this undefined sense that love was the greatest gift and resource that I was after, my warrior and my lover went back and forth for
Mm.
decades.
Yep.
And my lover would bring me into relationships, and then my warrior would say, "This is not what I'm looking for," and get out. And it would ruin the relationship. As I got into the pandemic and I started to get into that work, I'm like, well, who's my sovereign? What is my sovereign? What is that? What is that king within me that is going to reconcile the different parts of my soul and my psyche so that I can become whole? And that's where that's a part of the journaling that I did was, okay, what does that mean? Who is my warrior? What's his name? What is his identity? How do I bring him to life? And why has he taken me on the journey that he has for 20 years? Who is my lover? What's his name? Who's my magician? How does it all come together? And it's this relentless introspection of the internal kingdom or internal world that once we start to get that in order, then you start to project that out into the world around you. And in the absence of that today, most men, and I mean, think about it too, Kara, when you think about like, we didn't grow up with this, but obviously today there's a swipe right, swipe left dating culture
Yep.
where you can go online and you can have a completely superficial relationship that's based nothing on but physical without really knowing anything about the person. I mean,
Yep.
it's this almost this high profile kind of weird prostitution in some ways
Right.
for both parties. And that is nothing more than a shallow attempt to fill something inside you that only you can fill from within you. Like you have
Right.
to do that internal work. For me, journaling has been the biggest part of that, but it's also been, Tony says leaders are readers.
Yep.
I mean, in the past 5 years, I've probably read 200 books. And
Wow.
it's just that constant, like, I want to know other people's thoughts. Like, I want to hear from other people on their journey, their experience of life, whatever capacity that is, because it is deepening who I am as a
Right.
man to appreciate someone else's perspective. And as I deepen and fortify what's inside of me, I project that out. And that's why, like I said earlier, to me, the most beautiful gift I can receive is making a woman feel safe enough to open herself to me. Because that to
Right.
me is a paradise. I mean, that really is a paradise when you get inside someone's soul.
Yeah. Getting goosebumps over here. It's just refreshing because it's like, these aren't grocery store conversations you typically
No,
have with people, right? So it's like,
right.
I'm like, I'm glad I did this little exercise and I'm excited to have talks like this with a bunch of different people. So one of the things you just mentioned about like you doing the work and like journaling for 2 straight years, like that's a commitment for sure. But I think, men in general, even women in their masculine, definitely, when we say like it sounds cheesy, it sounds simplistic when we say once you can't look outside of yourself to find yourself, right? And I think we've said that so many years for so many different ways, and it's like, yeah, you got to look within. But the joke is like you actually do, like you
Yeah.
actually do need
Yeah.
to. I know, like Ken and I, we've been married for 23 years off and on. We've had three like total separations,
Okay.
where I've lived out of the house for multiple years. Um, I've moved back in the last 2 years, I guess now. Um, but this work is work, right? And it's not, and I think the thing that he's 50, almost 54, and he's coming to all of the things that you're saying. And it takes men longer. So I think there's like
Yeah.
this weird, women are just kind of like, okay, like we're over here healing. We're like 2, 3 years into our healing. And the guys are like, healing? What do I need to heal for? And I think there's like we're, strangers in the night, right? Like there's women, there's
Yeah.
this whole school of women who have done deep, deep work on themselves and come home to, and that was part of my journey too, was like realizing nothing I'm going to ever receive is going to come from someone else.
Yeah.
And when
Oh, I
you
love that. I love that.
sit with that, it's terrifying because it's an
Sure.
admission that it's all on you.
Yeah.
But for me, like, and I meditate every day. We do a ton of Dr. Joe Dispenza in our
Oh,
household.
I was just going to bring him up. That's
Oh,
perfect.
life changing. Like, I've loved him for a long time. I think Tony's a master of like the three-dimensional strategy, and Joe's 5D master. He's the master of 5D and
You know,
quantum. Oh, he's
it's
wicked.
well, and it's so fascinating that they don't really cross-pollinate a lot. Like you don't see
Right.
them. I saw that Tony had Joe on his podcast in 2017, and
Oh,
then
he
Tony's
did. I gotta
on,
go find that.
yeah, and then Tony's on. Tony has a quote on the back of his last book, Becoming Supernatural. Tony, to me, it's like Tony is hammer away, like
Yeah.
find a way, like it's willpower, it's
Yeah.
strength,
Strategy.
and it's
Yeah.
just force.
Yeah.
And then
Brute
Joe
force.
is like is and they're getting to the same place, but Joe
Right.
does it more elegantly. Like
Yeah.
it's, come up with a thought, come up with the intention and the emotion, and then just
Right.
let it happen. What I was going to say about that too is men traditionally, so in the military, like, I mean, um, my dad could be very loving, but I had a knack for getting on his last nerve. Like I found his last nerve and I would poke at it until he became incorrigible, like just this beast.
Right.
And but he was also kind of like rub some dirt on it. Like there was kind of that like, and that is a huge part of, or at least certainly in the military, a huge part of masculine culture, right? It's going, I mean, when you're out in the field training, if you get injured, suck it up and drive on. That is
Right.
what you get told from your brothers. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, I can't, and it's because I can't let the tribe down.
Right.
Like I have, it doesn't matter that my leg hurts or whatever happened, I have to carry on. The reality of that then is men suppress their
Right.
bad experiences in life and keep them at bay. And, part of my discovery during the pandemic was I had 20 years, in some ways, I had a childhood trauma thing that I had suppressed. And I had all this stuff. And that's what, when Dispenza talks about the body is a memory of your life,
Mhm.
basically. And so if you have not processed emotional events, significant emotional events from your life, that energy is literally trapped in your body.
Yep.
You cannot be in the present moment if part of you is living in the past.
Yep.
I mean, it's just impossible. That is physics. It's Einstein. And so for many men, because they're afraid to go into the internal world, they fancify and they kind of get really just obsessed with the material physical world, the world of the five senses.
Yep.
And I've been teaching yoga now for 17 years, and yoga was really what got me on the path of, oh shit, there really is something else inside of me that I need to nurture, and not just nurture, I need to orchestrate so that I am embodying the best part of me by bringing it, by really resurrecting it within me so that all I have and all I need is within me now and projecting
Right.
outwards, as opposed to an external dependency that I constantly need to satisfy or satiate by looking through, multiple partners or whatever the case may be.
Hmm. And I think ultimately that's, so many men spend their whole life doing that, looking
Yeah.
outside. Women too,
Yeah.
right? We're always looking for like the best this and the best that, or, this guy or that guy, or this job or that job. And that was like when I started doing Dr. Joe really as a practice, not just sort of watching videos and such. It was my vision for my life is what I became obsessed with being in. Like I have childhood trauma, but it's not for me anyway. I've managed it. And when I say managed it, I've worked through it. There's still some stuff in my body 100%. Like I'm probably about 40 pounds overweight, and literally no matter what I do, it's not leaving. I have some
Mm.
medical conditions, that autoimmune stuff, that make it challenging, but it's certainly not why it's staying. There's still trauma in here that I need to release in terms,
Yeah.
and it's all in the middle, and it's all the
Mm.
safety thing. Like as long as I have my pooch in my tummy, then I'm safe. And
Interesting.
it's
Interesting.
more women have that weight staying in the middle 100% out of safety. Like, and I'm perimenopausal, so that I'm not saying there's no biomarkers on why it's like that, but it's been like this forever. I was really
Right.
skinny. I had an overactive thyroid, and I was high adrenaline, alcoholic family, physical abuse, whatever. And then when I moved out, I had a treatment done, and I went low thyroid, and I've been low thyroid for 23 years. There's lots
Mm.
of low thyroid people who are thin and fit, right? I'm moderately active. I love to play and do things like that. But it's interesting because when you say it's still stuck in the body, it's definitely stuck in the body. And
Yeah.
that's sort of the next, I would say, layer of things for me, is to like, I've gotten so much out, but it's almost still feels surface level. Like I've forgiven both my parents have passed. They died when I was like late 20s for my mom, and then just into my early 30s with my dad, like young. And through Tony Robbins mostly, like, and Byron Katie, and I've done so much healing. My heart is healed, but my body still remembers. And so it's
Mm.
an interesting dichotomy because I'm frustrated now by it. I'm like, well, for fuck's sakes, like I've already dealt with this shit. Why is it, what the hell, body? Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's so fascinating because men, you, you are taught to just pick your shit up and
Yeah.
carry on.
100%.
And like for in our household, I'm always trying to say like, Ken's like, but I had a decent childhood. Da, da, da. I'm like, I know, but there's still stuff. Like there's always stuff. I know your parents. I know there was for sure stuff. May not be as big as my stuff or someone else's stuff, but there's still stuff. And so I think it's really interesting when you talk about journaling, because that's not a practice that most guys even consider to be therapeutic in any way. But I love it, and I talk about it with anyone who will listen. It accesses this part of you, this child side of you, like the inner child part of you, I think,
Yeah.
when you allow it to, where you're just sort of letting it all out. And I think that's one of those ways where a man will become more confident when he can access his emotions in a healthy way. It's not the opposite, like you've been told all this time. Like you
Right.
actually become way more manly when you're like, yeah, I can cry. I'm
Yeah.
okay with that. But until you get there, you think, oh, I'm a pussy if I cry. But until you like say, oh, well, I got nothing left. I'm on the bottom. I got to figure this out. And you go through that process, then all of a sudden you're like, crying is actually quite masculine, and it's quite beautiful, and it's quite awesome. It's not this
Love.
dirty thing.
Well, no, I mean, and how many times have you seen Tony cry in an event?
Oh
And
my
there's
God. People are
six
always
foot
like, oh, he's
seven
such a,
giant.
I'm like, he's a freaking crybaby. This guy cries all the time.
It's, but it's like, it's masculine. It's like, it's
Mm-hmm.
so beautiful. I've been listening. I'm really excited. Jordan Peterson has another book coming out in a couple weeks, and I heard him speak, at a performing arts center here locally, and just what a deep thinker.
He's
But
amazing.
he talks about how your growth is found through overcoming your challenges.
Yeah.
Like you kind of have to, and I mean, and he talks about the whole purpose of your life is to make your life the grand adventure, like
Right.
to reconcile what you believe and to go whatever lengths you need to go to realize, okay, I'm shedding limiting beliefs to get to a deeper belief, but that process is kind of in effect facing the dragon, right?
Right.
There is a beast hiding, guarding the treasure.
Right.
And
I
I
love
think it was
that.
Carl Jung who said that which you most want to find will be found where you least want to look. And for men, that is inside. And the challenge in today's society is, thanks to mobile phones and I mean screens everywhere. I mean, there's marketing at games. I mean, it's all over the place. There is this. It's almost like we're placated because of the visual stimulation,
Right.
and our phone. We now have access to more information than world leaders had 30 years ago. I mean, it's
Yeah.
incredible, but it's also overwhelming, and that is for me. I got to a point of saturation, kind of in early 2000, right before the pandemic really hit, and realized all that I'm looking at on Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat or whatever is me trying to find me.
Hmm.
And the only place I'm going to find that being is inside of here.
Yeah.
And as I dig deeper and realize how deep the soul is, it awakens me to, well, it's not just deep in me, it's deep in everyone. It's just
Oneness.
a question of how, yeah, it's how well does someone know that? And the greatest gift, I took a friend of mine, my workout partner, I took him to Tony's event in Germany back in September, and it was
Oh,
his first event. He was a little skeptical, really successful man, plastic surgeon, has got 5 offices here in North Carolina. And I remember we met for lunch on the first day. He's like, "Thank you so much. This is amazing." The second day, the same thing. And the third day, he's like, "I got to tell you, I was skeptical about this, but when Tony explained it, chemically, it all makes sense." And now he's doing the priming and he's like, "How do I get my
amazing.
niece to do this?" Yeah, it's really, really beautiful because I know there's a deeper part of him that he's waking up to.
Right.
And it's through the courage to have introspection that a man finds their soul. And when they do, they discover that oneness. And I mean, if you look at oneness, in my experience, is not traditionally something that men promote.
Right.
It's a feminine kind of thing because women are vessels of life. I mean, you
We
talked
make
about,
people.
yeah, you make people. And so there's a sense, but there's a sense of universality in that,
Yeah.
whereas men create, and that creation is usually external to them, not realizing that part of the creation process is creating yourself.
Yeah. Um, this is such an amazing conversation. I knew it was going to be good. Um, okay,
Thank you.
so I lots of things. Okay. Got to keep my thoughts straight here. So when it comes to one of the things that I think um men are starting to maybe realize or starting to come to is community.
Mhm.
Um and I think back in the day, you had to be by yourself quietly hunting a lion or hunting a bear, hunting a whatever. And we talk about hunter gatherer. I'm a gatherer, you're a hunter. I have
Right.
huntress in me. I am, yeah, I mean, you can probably tell I can be pretty alpha and I can be, you know, um, I have a company, I need to sell things in my company, whatever. I love it. But it's not I don't want to be on all the time. And I think that's the distinction for women now is that I can be on in the business, but be quiet, but community is a huge part of that. And I think what's really interesting that I'm seeing in men right now is the departure from doing it alone, like a hunter in the forest, because we're not doing that anymore. That's not reality anymore. We don't have to be quiet in a forest and kill a deer. I mean, during
Right.
hunting season, sure, but it's not your
Right.
everyday anymore.
Sure.
So speak a little bit because I think one of the biggest, I think, profound shifts that I've seen with men in their 40s and 50s and beyond is there's two camps. There's the guy who's like, fuck it, I'm going to do by myself. Or the guy who's like, oh no, I need my brothers near me. And I speak a
Mm.
little bit about that because obviously if you're in Tony Robbins land and you're a coach and I'm sure you have a group of dudes or people around you or mentors even or coaches. Talk a little bit about the importance of men learning from other men how to be men again and not, gamers and pot smokers and vapors and addicted to porn.
Right.
Like
Right.
there's that's so acceptable now in mainstream everything. Like I mean, it sounds super simplistic, but talk about your community of other men who've helped kind of keep you on your shit when you need to be kept on your shit.
Yeah, so I got into Spartan races in
Oh,
2017. I did my first
I've done
Spartan
them.
race. Yeah, and it was wild because the trainer, my one of my friends who's a trainer at our gym at the time, he was he had a boot camp and he would run people to prep them for the race. And so I said, let me do this, let me see what it's about. And it was ironic because it's basically what I got paid to do in the military, and now I'm paying to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah.
But that was okay because it was like, well, this is kind of cool. It makes me, it fires up the warrior spirit a little bit. So in 2017, I did a 5K. Then in 2018, I did a 5K, a 10K, and a half marathon.
Woo.
And initially, after the half marathon, like I hadn't trained for it. It was horrible. And I remember like leaving the race. I'm like, I'm fucking done. Like, that's it. And then the next week, I went to my trainer, the same guy, and I said, let's do the 32-mile race next year. And he's like, "What? No, no." And I said,
You
"No, let's
crazy?
do it." And so we got six people. And for all of 2019, we did like 14 or 15 races. And then
Holy moly.
it culminated with this 32-mile race right before Thanksgiving here in the United States in November. And it was a miserable day when we did it. It was on the outskirts of Charlotte, North Carolina, raining all day, almost I don't know, 15 degrees, 10 degrees or so. I mean, it's a cold day and it just rained the entire day, 11-hour race. Um, and then the pandemic hit and
Yep.
racing stopped. And then in 2021, I think it started up again. And one of my other friends who had been part of this 32-mile group said, "Well, you got to lead us again." And I was like, "I'm done with this. Like this served a purpose for me, but it was like a migration." And as I got into the Tony community, and there are weekly masterminds, and I got invited to a men's group, and I haven't attended it for a couple months now, but I got invited 8 or 9 months ago after going to Tony's Leadership Academy, and the gentleman running the group said, "Will you come speak and be part of our group?" And I said, "Yeah." And there's a duality to that. I think that in some sense there is, let me commune with men in a meaningful way. And by meaningful, I don't mean let's go get drunk
Right.
and watch movies, or let's get high and watch movies, or let's go to a bar. Like that phase of my life is done. And I don't want to congregate with those men because there's no value in it for me. And therefore I can't, my way of adding value in those situations is to not participate.
Yep.
Then it's okay, let me find men who are courageous enough to have real conversations, because you realize that's the pathway towards enlightenment. I mean, there's
Hmm.
just no other way to say it. You can be superficial, you can live and be fascinated by and have success in the material world. If you want a deeper, not only understanding of life, but an ability to be fulfilled on a deeper spiritual level, you have to do the internal work and surround yourself with people who are doing that same level or above you. And that's why this past year I committed to joining Tony's Platinum Partners. And so I started in May this past year. We just got back from Abu Dhabi in India
Oh,
last
how
week.
was it?
Oh, it's
I
fantastic.
know.
I
It looked
mean,
so good.
it's so beautiful, but it's being around those kind of people.
Right.
And even in that environment, there are people like who like to drink and party till two
Yep.
o'clock in the morning. I'm just not going to socialize with them. It's not about there's no judgment. They're wildly successful, but I want to be with men who want to understand how we define masculinity in the 21st century, because the
Right.
opportunity is ours and it's for us to do, but that requires active participation. And I love what you said earlier about the hunters, right? Because I mean, I'm sure many women can relate to, if they go home to their partner and say, "How's your day?" And he says, "Good." I mean, it's this monosyllabic ape-like response, when there's a deeper being inside that person, if they can just have the courage to let that person out and
Right.
and do the internal work.
Yeah. Amazing. Um, yeah, I know a lot of people that a lot of people that I'm joining Platts. I want to say the goal. I don't like that word anymore. I'm off that word for right now, but the plan is to join like probably end of next summer so that I can
Okay.
do relationship trip because I know you
Yes.
guys did
Yeah. Yeah.
happiness this time.
Yep.
So you're not doing relationship, but that's sort of, but I keep hearing, he's getting older, right? Eventually he's going to be like, hey, tired. Although who knows with that guy. Um, but that's the plan is to, end of the next summer, probably just before October, so I can do that trip too.
Awesome.
Um, talk about what service means to you and why that's an important part of being a man, to be in service.
What a fantastic question. You're just, oh, I
I'm
love
told
these questions.
I'm pretty decent at the interview thing. I've been told. So because I
They're
really genuinely
beautiful.
love to know, right? So
They're beautiful. To me, service is about giving without expectation of anything in
mhm.
return. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And that's the whole point. Like I remember I gave someone a gift. I don't remember even the context of it, but like it's probably 6 or 7 months ago. And like, well, I didn't do anything for you. I'm like, you're not supposed to. Like, that's the whole
Right.
point. Let me feel good about genuinely doing something good for you without anything in return expected. Like, that's the whole point of being in service. And I mean, I know that's, we keep going back to Tony. That's something Tony teaches, but it really is coming from a place of adding value to someone else's life in a way that demonstrably moves them forward on their journey. And when you live from that place, the gift of serving comes back to you. And it's not, I mean, it's the beauty of doing something for someone without any expectation of being even thanked
Right.
is in of itself a gift to yourself. Like that's when you do that without this, let me do it for visibility or let me do it for reciprocity or let me do it for acknowledgement. No, let me do it. And maybe no one even knows that I'm the one who did it. Great. I
Yeah.
know I did it. And I know I did it from a place of authentically wanting to make someone or something better. And so service to me is, and obviously when it comes to a business, you're going to put a price tag on
Right.
those things. But in a place of operating from a place of service, then it's just how can I be of service to someone? And once you have that on your radar, you're always looking for whether it's stopping to let someone cross the street to go to the grocery store in the parking lot or opening a door for
Yeah.
something. It's the minor things, but those all lead up to a deeper definition of who you are because that's where you're operating from.
Yeah. It's so I've done 26 Tony events since 2017.
It's awesome. Wow.
Many of them are crew, like a ton of them are crew.
Okay.
Um, and people, people that I don't know if you've had this experience, but I have a harder time. I don't have a high bullshit meter. I don't want to talk about the weather. Like I
Yeah.
want to talk about what your vision for your life is. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and I go deep fast. It's like I can be in a grocery store and I'll be with my kids or whatever, and they'll be like, why did she tell you her whole life? I'm like, that's just the vibe I give. People just want to
Yeah.
talk to me, right?
Right.
And it's interesting when we talk about service because people that I'm friendly with, and there's a group of girls that I was really close with that I stopped drinking this year and they stopped hanging out with me. And that's cool.
Mm.
If that's how it is, all right. But I found myself in that world, my need to belong to them because I have a thing about that. I don't belong anywhere. My need to belong to this group of girls actually, over the course of 2 years, really diminished who I am. And I really changed and not for the better. I stopped coming in the door of any household and talking positive. I started to be more negative. I started to gossip more. I started to do all this stuff that I didn't love. And one of the questions was always like, why do you go to so many events? Like, why do you crew and why do you volunteer? Like, and you have to pay to go. And I'm like, yeah, I fucking know. I paid a shit ton of money to work for free for this guy.
Yeah.
Stupid
Yeah. Yeah.
asshole. No, I'm just kidding. And it was like, I sat with it and I think, over my tenure, we'll say of crewing, I have, at least to my knowledge, I've saved at least 5 people from killing themselves. And I
Wow.
communicate with them still. And that's being an usher lead. Like that's just me walking around. And I've seen, and I get emotional when I talk about it, but when you see 10,000 people come in on Thursday And then you see them leave on Sunday,
Yeah.
just cracked wide open.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why you serve,
Right.
because you're part of that. And it doesn't matter if you get, because we don't get, I mean, we get our little wrenches, or last time we got a really nice cup, which I lost at the stupid airport, of course. I
Oh
just crewed
no.
business mastery, and I've like, for fuck's sakes, Kara, like, never fails. I cannot keep any. I've paid for merchandise. I've gotten free shit from there. I cannot keep it. I don't know if I think I don't deserve it, so I lose it, whatever.
No,
But
don't feel bad. I lost my hat from we
oh,
did Platinum New Zealand in May, and I lost my hat and my windbreaker during
so
the trip.
annoying.
So
So
yeah.
annoying. But I crew because I can see the impact of my body being there for these people.
Yeah.
And it's for them. And people say, well, like, have you met Tony? I'm like, no. I said, I've been near him a million times. And he stands there and I'm crouched. Like, if you see me, I'm the one on the ground hiding from the camera going, that's my
Right.
job usually, right? But I'm like, and I've said it's not, I don't care. Like, I love Tony, of course, but it's like
Sure.
Uncle Tony to me, like, I could do, we probably could both do UPW at this point. Like, I could recite the entire 4 days,
Yeah.
Joseph's stuff, Scott's stuff, all of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's about serving. And I think the thing that I love to see when the men come to serve in a crew environment like that is, first of all, your ego gets knocked around hard by each other.
Mm.
And I've
Yeah.
witnessed it. And I just sit there with my popcorn and be like, look at these boys are getting pissed off. This is
Yeah.
great. But then this humility happens between you and this brotherhood is built. And it's so beautiful to witness it. But then you get in the underneath it. And when you know you've helped anybody in that environment, and like you said, like, nobody even needs to know about it, there's
Right.
something that happens to us as a human where you just, it's like better than drugs. And
Gosh. Yeah.
yeah, like that humility. I mean, I remember the first time, my very first event I crewed was actually Jersey, which
Okay.
I'm planning on going to. And I walked, I'm not kidding. And I didn't know nothing really. Okay. I didn't understand. I hadn't done a date with Destiny yet. Didn't understand masculine. And I remember holding the door. And the second I opened the door, I realized that I was actually volunteering for someone and I wasn't the boss because I have my
Mm.
own company. I've been the boss for 10 years. And I remember opening the door and being like, I had a moment of total panic. I was like, oh, somebody's going to tell me when I can go pee. Somebody's going to tell me when I can go eat. Like, it just, all this tidal wave of just panic because ego was like, whoa, lady, someone's going to be telling you what to do. And I didn't like
Right.
it. And like, here I am
Right.
26 events later. Please, someone tell me what to do. Now in my feminine, right? So I think it's just, service is something. And to those of you listening, like, it doesn't have to be a Tony event. It doesn't have to be some grand thing of, 5 days, 17-hour days. But like, look around you, look in your community, like, look, if somebody needs, I went and helped a lady put pumpkins in her trunk last week. This cute little old lady, I'm like, how's she going to pull that off? There's like 7 big pumpkins and she's getting into a Prius. Nobody's
Oh,
around to
geez.
help her, right?
Yeah.
But just look for ways, because there's something that's so beautiful and connects you so deeply to everything when you help and you're not asking for. So I love that you share what service means to you, because I think men really need to, because you guys are taught, like, club it over the head, drag it into the house. I'm a hunter. I don't got
Right.
time for service, but I think
Right.
it makes you such a better human, right? So thank you for
Well, it's either
sharing that.
that. Yeah. No, it's either that or it's quid pro quo, right? I mean, it's horse trading. Like,
Right.
give me something and I'll give you something in return. And
Right.
it's not the same.
Yeah, no, it is not the same. How are you for time? I'm getting close to wrapping it up, but are you
I'm
okay
good.
still?
I love these questions.
Okay.
I can go as long as you want.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about relationship kind of stuff. I mean, so are you married? Are you single? What's
No,
your
single. I'm actually meeting with, there's a Platt who does a mastermind on attracting a high vibration
Oh,
partner. And
okay.
that's been my focus. But honestly, my focus has been ever since the pandemic. I've been, like I said earlier, I've been on a really deep journey on crafting and cultivating my mission. And that has, I've had some amazing women come into my life, and there's been some really beautiful opportunities, and they've all gone down a certain length of that path until I realize
Yeah.
this is not serving my mission. Like
Yep.
they're amazing. Some really just incredible women. Um, but no, it's for me, I'm working the vibration piece and letting that play out, but it's
Right.
really about making my service matter. So
Yeah. Have you read The Way of the Superior Man? I feel like, of course, you have.
yes,
I'm like,
yes,
I
yeah,
feel like I don't even need to ask that question. I've
yes,
read it, and I
yeah,
I read it first, and then I gave it to Ken to read. This was years ago. Maybe we need to revisit it. Probably, probably. Um, but I think, one of the things that we talk about in our communities and in this work that we do, and I mean, I'm still coach when it comes up, if it comes up, is the purpose. And for a man, it's like that transmutation of energy. Like if you're not, and this is hard for a lot of guys, right? Especially now with like gaming and vaping and porn and dope. Like, I'm in Canada, everybody can smoke and get high all day long down the street. Nobody gives a shit anymore. It's disgusting. I think it's gross. Like, do it if you want, but go in your house and do it. Don't smoke in my
right,
face. Like, blah. But it's this transmutation of, and even in Thinking Grow Rich, he talks about, when you're like, even when it comes to sex, like not holding it in, not no type of ejaculation whatsoever, and then transmuting that elsewhere. And I think that that's a skill for men right now, because it's hard. It's all over the place. Like,
yeah,
and not just in sex, but like any type of gratification, it's so available
yep,
that I think in 2024, you have to be very, very strong to not go around and sleep around, because that's easy for especially guys like you. You're masculine, you're attractive, like your shit, you're a coach. Like the it's this weird dichotomy of like you're getting better and better and better and more attractive, but you got to hold it in, because it can get really and that's like that spiritual F-boy thing. Like it can get really easy for some men to just be like a kid in a candy store. And then that growth, I feel like, really stops, because now you're looking again on the outside and not on the inside, um, in that way. But when it comes to relationships, talk a little bit about, as somebody who, has a very obviously solid understanding of who he is, when you're
yep.
looking, when you talk about that vibrational thing, give me a sense of, or give women maybe hope. I don't know, but like, what does a man, is it just a feeling when you vibe with somebody, or is there some type of quality that you're looking for? Obviously, you don't want a super aggressive masculine energy woman, because that's
Right.
like there's two penises in the house. We don't need that.
We don't need
Maybe
that.
talk a little bit about, and that was what I said at my date with Destiny. I left my proverbial penis on the floor at West Palm Beach, Florida, right after you guys yelled freedom.
Oh, nice.
Instantly,
Yeah, that was
penis fell
strong.
off,
Oh.
and I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. I didn't
Was
get
that
it.
last year? Was that last
No,
year?
2019.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I've
Yeah.
done I've done I've participated in one myself, and then I've crewed two virtuals.
Okay.
But that one, when I
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
you, life changing, like that
Yeah.
one word. If I hear anybody say freedom now, I'm like, excuse me, what was that? But that is encapsulates actually everything that a woman wants to feel. Like the women and I, we made jokes like for the rest of the week after that, but in all seriousness, that's how we want to feel. We want to feel like, I
Sure.
thought not a single person could come into this room, all of these men would kill tigers for me right now,
Yeah.
instantly, with
Yep.
one word. So talk a little bit about what a man in that energy is, like, what he's feeling, what he's vibing for, what he's looking for. What are some things what are some red flags, white flags, the drill.
Yeah. So I crewed my first in-person event last Date with Destiny, and when Tony did Freedom, all the crew got together in the center of the conference convention center and did it together. It was really, really powerful.
Oh, that'd have been so cool.
It's so let's start by saying what I think is the problem, because when we have the problem, then we can really understand the solution. The problem, as I see it, is we, and I say this, I think both from a masculine and feminine perspective, both men and women do this. We have a tendency to people please.
Mhm.
And if we see someone we're attracted to, we want to fit into their key or keyhole, without being sexual about it, but we want
Yep.
to, let's downplay the things that aren't going to get me closer to this person and upsell the similarities or commonalities we have.
Right.
And that's good for a while because it gets that chemistry going and connection going. And then ultimately what happens is the rest of you comes to the surface and it's like, oh shit, this isn't what I signed up for with this person, or
Right.
this person now, like this person isn't what I need. This is not who I'm some much more than this. And when you look at the superficial swipe right, swipe left culture we have, I mean, it's a fixation on the physical material world with a very short-term outcome in mind. The shift I made for me was, and it kind of goes back to be the kind of person you want to attract.
Right.
And that is, there is a nobility, and I use that word specifically, there is a nobility in discretion.
Mm-hmm.
There is a nobility in saying, you are beautiful. There's obviously chemistry between us, but, or we're not going to go further. Like we're not.
Right.
And I'll give you a great example. Not that I didn't profess, and I don't think there's any mutual attraction, but when we were in Abu Dhabi, at one point we were all dancing, and there was a woman who was by the riser in the back where they have all the technicians and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and she was dancing by herself, but you could just see that she was in her feminine energy. It was beautiful. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm so inspired. And it lit me up from a dance perspective. And the next day, I just happened to be in line next to her, and we got to talking. And she was a Pilates instructor from Switzerland, um, and we ended up spending dinner together outside, away from everybody else, looking at the beach. And we talked for like 3 hours, and it was a really beautiful conversation. She talked about her husband and their kids, and then towards the end, there was this kind of acknowledgement that she said something to the effect, oh, just so you know, my first boyfriend's name was David. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And it was a beautiful moment because there was no indiscretion coupled or attached to it.
Right.
So it's it's counterintuitive in some ways to say, well, I'm going to vibrate with the attributes that I want to find in someone,
Right.
attributes of passion, of intimacy, of strength, of courage, of brilliance, of depth, in the hopes that then I'm going to somehow attract that person without knowing who they are, or even if I
Right.
have an idea, but kind of letting it go. And yet that's kind of the path, right? Because
Yep.
otherwise it's a taster's choice. And
Right.
how far do you go down that path before you're like, okay, I don't want to whack-a-mole anymore.
Right.
And we didn't talk about it earlier, but part of my experience growing up, when I grew up, it was hair metal bands like Motley Crue, Rat, Bon Jovi. It was the unadulterated objectification of women. I mean, they named songs about them. They had strippers in there. I mean, even in the military, people don't know this because there's this homage we pay to the military for people for their service, and rightfully so. It's a very hard life. But I remember going into a Navy officers club in Oceana, Virginia, where the pilots used to go. And this was on base, and they had strippers on the base. And you're
Crazy.
like, oh, that would not fly in this day and age.
Right.
So but it really is cultivating a sense of be the person you want to attract.
Right.
Be that level of depth and intensity and fortitude and playfulness at the same time,
Yep.
because it's going to naturally happen then
Right.
where you meet someone and you connect with them, and you connect at the appropriate level, and you can still have an intimate conversation with them that doesn't necessarily lead anywhere, and
Right.
there's no disappointment that comes from that. It's For men, again, it's you have to turn off the external
Right.
radar and kind of fortify and strengthen the internal signal and vibrate at the frequency of who you want to attract. But that in and of itself, it means you actually must authenticate that. Like you
Right.
can't fake that. Like you
Right.
have to authentically be virtuous. You have to authentically be courageous, be
Right.
passionate, be someone who provides safety and comfort. Because when you do that, it's not selective.
Right.
It's not like, well, I'm providing this for my partner
But
and
not anyone
screw
else.
everybody else. Yeah,
Right.
it's got to be, this is who I am. And so this is how I engage with everyone. And that just so happens at some point you separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak, and
Yep.
you're going to find that person who is, oh my gosh, we are vibrating in sync. And part of that too is that's really the beginning of the journey, right? It's not about let's find someone and then I get to be who I am for the next 50 years. It's let me find someone who's going to challenge me to grow on the level of depth that I've already obtained, because that in and of itself is going to bring me in contact with someone who's vibrating at a very high level.
Yep. Yep. No, I love every single thing about that. You mentioned that when you saw that woman dancing by the risers,
Yep.
you were inspired.
Yeah.
Say more about what was inspiring about it, and what did it inspire you to think or feel?
I could appreciate her feminine energy so purely because that's where she was operating from.
Right.
And it inspired me to just dance more freely. Like, and I don't consider myself a dancer, but that was the release. I mean, that is to see a woman in that state is to see a woman in freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see a woman in freedom, it calls to the freedom inside you. And that goes back to the Braveheart thing and freedom and that masculine. So it's almost like stoking the fire of masculinity
Right.
within you.
Yep.
And it was so funny because then the next day she got on stage, like we had the dancers from Embody come on stage and like 3 or 4 people from the community got on. And we talked about it afterwards. She's like, I never would have done that. But like, I'm like, it's so interesting because you said that's not who you were, but then you got on stage. She's like, yes, but I got in the back. And that's the beauty of, I mean, to me, that is the beauty of the feminine. When a woman is in her feminine, there is contrast and contradiction. Like
Right.
there's this beautiful, amazing soul who's dancing like she's on fire in this brilliant, elegant spiritual embrace. And then there's a person who sort of sheepishly gets on stage and goes behind everyone, but still wants to participate in that experience.
Yeah.
And rather than say, well, that's so confusing to me, it's like, that's so elegant. It's so, oh, there's just deliciousness between those two poles. So
Yeah.
hopefully that answers your
Yeah.
question.
No, it totally does. And it's funny you say it like, and without getting to, I mean, I won't explain the entire, I mean, I guess I can, but so what David's talking about in at Date with Destiny, which is one of Tony's pillar events, I always say like UPW's like kindergarten, Date with Destiny's university. It will rock you in the best way possible. There's an exercise on day 4, relationship day, that he does where he will, there's, average, let's say 3 to 5,000 people, half that are women ish. He'll say, okay, women, ladies, stand up. And we all stand up. The guy stays seated, and he'll play like, first song will be like Cyndi Lauper. And so, me, I'm kind of a brat. So I was like, girls just want to have fun. Like I fucking dance this 1,000 times. I'm not into it. I was a bit of a jerk, but I was kind of like, and I mean, I danced for 20 years, Ukrainian dancing, ballet, hip hop, Latin, Irish, the works, right? And I'm like, just being a smart ass. And then the second song was Rihanna and Britney Spears singing S&M. So the lights go down, they go red. And if there's a couple podcast episodes where I actually do a whole deep dive into Date with Destiny, so look for those ladies if you want to hear the whole thing. And the lights go down, they go red, and all of a sudden you're feeling kind of sassy, and you're like, okay. And like, I love Caribbean music, soca, like all that. So I was like feeling myself. And then the third song was a Sarah Brightman song called You Take My Breath Away, and I'll never forget it. And for me personally, I closed my eyes. And anytime I'm channeling, or I'm channeling from God or universe and I'm coaching, like I close my eyes all the time. In the beginning of coaching a session, I'm like, just know, remember, I close my eyes a lot. And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I closed my eyes and I imagined a masculine behind me. And it wasn't like overly sexualized, but I felt like the presence of a man. And when I let go into that, my body started to move, and I just let go of all of it, all of it. And when I make jokes about like dropping my penis there, it felt like I finally connected with this deep goddess inside of me. And I didn't care who said, thought, what. I was like by myself with a partner, whoever he was, it was an imaginary person. And I was just feeling into him. And I remember just Like right now, I can access that now because I've practiced for so long. I can access what that vibration feels like inside of my body. But it's really tightened up for most women. Like it's not something that we're taught to embrace. And I just remember thinking, this is like, and then I kind of peeked and I opened my eyes and I see all my sisters, just same thing, like all different kind of movements. And the
Yeah.
men, you guys were like,
Oh yeah.
it's
Oh
like
yeah.
you were
It's
in awe. And
intense.
it wasn't like, I mean, when he says that thing about how many women didn't feel safe today and we all put our hand up, and how many didn't feel safe in the last week, we all put our hands up. Like women, we don't feel safe, generally speaking, in parking lots. And, there's lots of opportunities we're not feeling safe, but in that room, we felt safe enough to let go. And when you open your eyes and he says, okay, gentlemen, tell them how you feel. And it was like this child, like kind of like, oh, like you felt this sort of precious, like, oh, look at, and it
Yeah.
wasn't dirty. Like it didn't feel unsafe. It felt really beautiful. And so I think that's just like that connection. And that's what I talk about is going from your head to your heart for women, because we're all stuck in our heads. But when you connect with the body that way, freedom happens.
Yep.
And you, as the man, witness the freedom. And then you go, oh, I got to take care of her. I got to
Yep.
protect that. That's
100%.
what I want to protect. And I think
Absolutely.
that's what's missing right now is like, we don't get to do that and you don't get to do that. And so we have this collage of people and couples and relationships where everyone's really confused about it, but it's really actually very simple.
Tara,
um
I want to say something
yeah.
before it goes away. First, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius once said, "Imagine that you have died. Now go live your life like you're supposed to." And what he
Right.
said was, if you're not creating or emitting your own light, then you're creating darkness.
Mm,
And for so many men, they're creating darkness,
right.
and they're not conscious of it. But when you talked about feeling safe, I remember in 2017 when Tony talked about how many women don't feel safe in a parking lot, and watching, thousands of women raise their hand. That thought had never occupied my mind. Like the idea, because I am 6'2", at the time I weighed 20 pounds more than I do now, and it was mostly muscle. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I've just never had to consider
Right.
not being safe in a parking lot at 11 o'clock at night. And it was this huge wake up. But it makes me appreciate that is the lack of consciousness that a lot of men operate from, because there's this still sort of this alpha male inflate the chest, look at me, bring like kind of pulling the darkness, if you will, and not a realization that, oh my gosh, like these women, like I want them to feel safe. And
Right.
it's the huge shift when you make that. But I remember how profoundly that impacted me when I heard that in 2017. It was a lightning
Yeah.
bolt.
Yeah. Even as a woman, seeing all of my sisters put their hand up, I was like, okay, so it's not just me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been in situations where I've almost been raped by dance teachers. I've been in situations where like men will come up to my car and ask me out and like get right into my space up in like, and
Oh,
and
wow.
it's because the other problem is I think too that a woman like me gets confused by is like I'm very innocent in my heart. I
Hmm.
really really am. Like I cry a lot about really innocent things, or if I see a squirrel on the road, I'm bawling. Like the kids make fun of me, mom's crying again. Like I just feel things deeply about everything.
Sure.
And sometimes that gets me into trouble. And so then what the propensity is to think, oh shit, being who I am could actually get me killed or raped or beaten or something. So I better dial that down. And that happens to a woman as well over time, right? Because I mean, I was 18 years old working my first ad agency in this. I mean, he was probably 50 at the time. He's like, you have very strong sexual energy. Like, what does that even mean to an 18-year-old girl? And you're my boss.
Yeah.
Right. And so even early on, then I start to go, I better not do this. And you hide. And then that light dies. And over
Well, it's
time,
also, I was going to say, it's
yeah,
also, and that's why there are so many masculine women in the
right.
workforce,
Yep.
because they've had to adapt to the ape-like environment
Hmm.
sometimes and lose that feminine side of themselves. And then they wonder why they either need validation from their boss or something's missing because
Right.
they have turned off the inherent natural part of who they are
Yep.
in order to quote unquote fit in. And I think now that's shifting because I mean, there's so many, at least
It
to an
is
extent, but
to an
certainly like you
extent.
see, there are more women in C-suites and Fortune 500 companies, and you see they do lead from a very different way when they're
Hmm.
allowed to be in their feminine. And it is
Yep.
powerful, it is elegant, and it's a different kind of intelligence,
100%. Yeah.
which is the most beautiful part of it.
Yeah. And I think that's even another interesting point to bring up is that, I mean, I've always said, like, one of my courses that I sell when I coach women is how to sell in the feminine energy. It's radically different than, and Ken and he's my business partner as well. And he's waking up to his ability to sell himself. He's always put that on me because I'm more outgoing and I've been in sales for my entire career, but I'm like, but you'll notice our techniques are going to be totally different. The reason I'm
Yep.
successful at selling is because of how I'm interviewing you. I genuinely want to know what my prospect needs, wants, etc. And it's not hyperbole. It's like, I really genuinely want to know. Maybe this isn't a good fit for that person. I don't know. I won't know until I find out.
Right.
But women, the trick of it is that you put us in these C-suite and these CEO roles and these business owner roles, and we don't know how to turn it off. And then you have a woman who will attract a super feminine energy guy. Like, nothing to me is a bigger turnoff than when a guy's like, wow, you're so amazing. Like, you've really done, like, it's not catnip for a woman. Our ego will like to hear it. Yeah, it's me and my vernacular.
That
But
is brilliant. Oh, catnip for a woman.
it's not like,
Yeah.
anytime you put me on a pedestal, I want to jump off the edge of planet Earth. Like, please, like, I had a guy when I was single, and he was like, so tell me about your coaching and and I just kind of was like, I don't really want to talk about it. Like, I don't want to talk about my work. And he's like, well, can you coach me? And I was like, instantly my boner went away. I was like, and I said, yeah, for 500 an hour, I'm happy to. He's like, oh, I'm like,
Oh,
just stop. But
yeah.
I'm proud of the coach I am. I'm proud of the work I do. I love this. I love my podcast and things, but I still, there's still that disconnection that happens for women. And I talk to women all the time. We're burned out. We're tired because we don't want to carry the burden of that. Like, and sure, you can love what you do, but I always say, like, it's one thing if I have to make money to survive, you're going to get a very different version of Kara if I'm doing it because it's fun. And that's it. So the man has to decide, do you want a boss babe? Because that woman is really different than passenger princess. And so up to the man, right? And I know for me, I don't want to be a boss babe. I want to
Right.
have boss babe days, moments, sure. But for me, and this is the conversation in our household, like, I want to fully embrace my feminine energy and support my partner.
Right.
And that might be with business activities, that might be with dinner, that might be bringing peace, but I'm not here. I'm not the leader. I don't want to be the leader. I just don't want to be the leader. And if more women were honest about that, I think we'd have a better conversation between you and I, because men and women, because you guys think we want that. We don't. Women don't. They're saying it because they have to. But
Yeah.
when I get them just one-on-one quietly in a corner room somewhere and we're just chatting like girls, I'm like, girl, if you had $500,000 in your bank account right now and you didn't have to go to work tomorrow, would you go? And they're like, no, fuck no. I'm like, there you have it. And occasionally someone will say, no, I love what I do. I said, would you do it for free? Oh, well, no. Well, then you don't love what you do.
Right.
Right. So it's an
Yeah.
interesting space right now. And it's beautiful to be having these conversations with each other and with the opposite sex, because it needs to be had. Because the more burned out women get, we're done. We're not having babies anymore. Like, look at the generation
Yeah.
before us. They're not having
Yep.
kids. They can't. They're tired. They're burned out at 25 years old. And so I think it's super important to have this open dialogue. And I think men need to learn from men like you what it actually means. And it's not just beating your chest and driving a friggin' Lambo. Like, we don't give a shit about that.
Right.
Like, if I have an emotional tornado on you, can you handle it for 5 minutes? Are you running? Are you going to tuck and roll? Right. So, like, can you
Yeah.
stand there and just be like, give it to me? I'm good. Because,
Yep.
we're like toddlers. We just want to have a little bit of a tantrum and then we're good. We tire ourselves out. We need a nap. Put my thumb in my mouth and go for a nappy. Like, this is just how it is. We're not going to carry on for days. Like, just
Yeah.
okay, good. So,
Well, and it's the ability for men to listen and not try to solve too, right? It's
yeah,
like let
yeah.
the tantrum play out. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Just be like, you're so cute when you get mad.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do with that? I'm not going to be like, fuck you, David. I'll be like, yeah,
Right.
I am cute when I get mad. Thanks for noticing. Like, it's a totally different energy. It's
Yep.
hilarious, really. But yeah, interesting stuff. Well, so where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you? And talk a little bit about your coaching business and what you're doing there. If you're, are you taking
Yeah.
clients? What's the deal
Yeah,
there?
yeah. So you can go to my website, davidrichardsauthor.com. You can get my books there. You can sign up for coaching there. My coaching is really about it's in some ways a summary of what we've talked about, right? It's about bringing your whole self to what you do. And mostly I work with Fortune 500 executives because they have a work persona and then they have a real person persona. And when you divide yourself like that, you're not bringing all of yourself to what you
Mhm.
do. And that's why you need then this dependency on someone else, either for validation or rudder steer. And certainly in work, you need that, but you want to bring all of yourself to do what you do, because when you do, you're going to be more fulfilled and you're going to be more engaged. And so that's really what my coaching business is about.
Amazing.
So yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was incredible. And yeah, I mean, let's just everybody keep the dialogue going, ladies. Like, remember, they're not the enemy. They actually, men just want to serve. Like,
Yeah.
they just want to make us happy, and we make it really hard sometimes, you know. So thank you for this beautiful conversation. It was incredible. And
Thank you.
I'm excited to publish it and let everybody listen to it. But until next time, guys, I will see you on the next episode.